What's up guys, it's Jake Lewis and I want to walk you through how I have my Antelope Orion Rev 17 set up with my SSL SiX, how I use it for tracking, for mixing down records, how I have the wiring set up and how I have the whole Antelope matrix set up on the computer and how I switch between, recording and mixing. So let's just dive straight into how I have this set up. So the Orion Rev 17 has two DB25 outs. So I have 16 channels going out. There's none that can go in DB25, sadly. It's only either TRS or XLR inputs. I do have two DB25 to quarter-inch TRS cables coming out. The first 8 DB25 to quarter-inch TRS are coming out into channels 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are coming in on external, 1 left, 1 right. And then I have my monitoring on the 2 left, 2 right external input on here. You can use these external inputs and sum them into the Mixbus, which is what I'm doing here. In order to sum external 1 left, 1 right, you have to hit external 1 here, and this will route anything coming into external 1 right into the Mixbus with, channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now you might be asking, how am I monitoring with external 2? I'm having the main monitor A out, coming out of the Orion Studio, going out straight into external 2. And that's what I'm monitoring here on my monitor source section. This is the great thing about SSL and their products is the flexibility of routing. So I press down external 2, and now I hear whatever is coming in external 2, which is just my monitoring out of here. If you're wondering, which I was wondering, and I hit up Antelope, just want to make sure your monitor A output, or B if you're coming out of B going into here. Whatever it is, you want it at unity. You'll see it's on monitor A, and I have it at 0 dB. So it's just coming out unity gain straight into here, and then I'm controlling the monitoring here. I can dim, I can cut, I can switch to mono, I can use alt outputs if I have a second pair of speakers. I use this talk input as a talk back so I can talk to artists who are in the booth down the hall. So this is the mic I use to talk back to artists, and this mic is feeding directly into the talk input, and the talk input does have the LMC, this compressor, compresses a lot, and you can hear everyone in the room, which is great. That's your talk input gain. And now what I do is I use the fold back section here. So when I want to talk to an artist, when I want them to hear me, I press this. It feeds the talk channel into the fold back 1 output on the back of here. I have that output being routed into the Orion, and then I have that being sent through a submix on mix channel 1, as you can see here, mix channel 1. That's the room mic, which is coming in on channel 5. And then from channel 5 is going into the submix channel 1. And this submix channel 1 is being routed out of headphone back 1 right here. This is snaking all the way into the booth. So they hear everything that's coming out of mix channel 1. And as you can see on mix channel 1, I have headphone 1 output. We'll dive more into this, but I have all of the stuff that I want the artist to hear coming out of Pro Tools, which we'll get into more of like how I have it set up in the box. Now there's a couple ways you can set this up. The way I originally had it set up was I had channel 1 and 2 panned hard left and hard right. And those were my stereo Vox channels. And I just sent vocals to that. And then channel 3 and 4, which is stereo, that is my drums. 5, 6 is my instruments. And then 7, 8 on the external 1 input is effects. And I have that all submixed in the box, like in Pro Tools, in that way. I have all the vocals being submixed to one all vocal channel, which is being outputted to 1 and 2. All of the drums being submixed into a bus that's going out to 3, 4. Instruments all being submixed going out to 5, 6, and all the effects being submixed going out to 7, 8 on here. So technically I could have 10 if I didn't want to monitor with the board. I could just monitor, with the Orion if I wanted, and have 10 total channels. You can actually get more if you do have a DB25 cable coming in. You can get an extra 2 channels, 1 each on the mono via insert. I didn't do that because it's kind of complicated as far as like getting the right cabling. And I've actually recently switched how I have my submixes going. So for this mix in particular, I have like the kick, snare, and the bass going to channel 1 mono. Then I have the all lead vocals going to channel 2 mono. And then I have the drums, and then instrumentation, and then background vocals, which are stereo because I have left, right, mid panned like vocals and like vocal effects and like flanger, which wouldn't really work on a mono channel. The effects coming out 7 and 8. So it's really similar. It's just I feel like I'm getting a little bit more separation having, the kick, bass especially going in mono on channel 1, and then the vocals, lead vocals coming in mono on channel 2. There's a few ways you could do it. That's just how I'm doing it now. So that was all like the mixing side of stuff. But let's say you want to use these preamps. The way I have came up with a workaround is via these different input selections that you can select from, and using the stereo Q sends to send the signal. So for example, let's say I had a mic going into this XLR in. I would take line off. I would add my 48 volts if the microphone needed 48 volts. Add my high pass filter, because usually I do want that. And then I send this channel. I press on for this. This is stereo Q2. You could do a stereo Q1. It doesn't really matter. This is just how I have it set up. Stereo Q2, I have it panned hard left. So this signal should only be coming out of the left channel of stereo Q2. And then you also want this at unity gain. Then I have a 1/4 inch cable coming out of the back here, out of the left channel of stereo Q2, going into one of the channels of the Orion. And then also while I'm tracking, I have this channel muted because this stereo Q send is pre-fader. Even though you have this muted, you will still be getting signal coming out of stereo Q2. Then you can do the same for the second channel. You could theoretically, enable stereo Q2 on channel 2 and then pan it hard right, unity gain, and then have another 1/4 inch cable coming out of the right channel of stereo Q2 going into the Orion, and then use both of these preamps. And then you can track with the EQ and the compression, which has been great. One thing I didn't mention, so obviously you have all the channels coming out of the DB25, out of the Orion, coming into all the channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then theoretically, 9 and 10. You're gonna have to have the Mixbus out on the back here going into 2 channels of the Orion, and that's what you'll have being sent to your master. This is the SSL, I call it SSL bus in. That's just the output of the Mixbus on the SSL coming in to Pro Tools. So that's everything after it's summed, and then you can do your mastering and stuff. But that means you're gonna have to print every single bounce. You can't offline bounce once you do this. It's all analog, so if you wanna bounce something out, you have to make a second track. What I did was I created another stereo audio track. I arm record. I set the input to just a random channel, and then I renamed it print, and then I send this off to print, and then I press 3 and I record. And that's how you bounce it out every time. So I figured I'd get behind here and show you what's going on. This is the output, the Mixbus output. They call it mains, the main outs. And these are feeding into the back of the Orion. It can go in any of the inputs, but this is XLR to 1/4 inch TRS. And you want to use 1/4 inch TRS when going into the Orion because that'll enable you to bypass the Orion preamps. If you go in via an XLR connection, you're gonna get the color from the Orion preamps. I know for me, I don't want that. I just want the color from the board and nothing from the Orion. And then right here, these are my main monitor outs. So this is for your monitoring section. So these are going directly to my speakers, going from 1/4 inch to XLR because I have XLR inputs on the back of my speakers, which you can see right here. If you have a second pair of monitors, right there, I just focused on it, Alt-Mon. That's your alternative monitoring. So when you press this and it's green, it's coming out of the alternative outputs. These are your stereo Q outs right here. So this one right here, this is the SSL preamp channel 1. So when I enable that stereo Q2 left send, that's the preamp coming out here. And then this is my talk back. So when I press down that fold back 1 for the talk input, that means there's signal coming through here, which is going into the Orion. So that's how I have that set up. All right, so now I'm gonna show you guys how I have it set up within the Orion Studio Matrix here. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of options, and it looks kind of daunting at first, but once you get your head kind of around it, it becomes pretty simple, and you see how powerful it is. So the way they have this explained, it's broken down in from to to. So let me just walk you through how I have this set up. So these are your preamp inputs on your Orion. MU mic, that's their emulation stuff. I don't even bother with that. I don't have any of that stuff. Thunderbolt play is for Thunderbolt connection. You get an extra 6 or 8, I think it's 8 channels to play with within the Orion Studio Matrix. I don't use Thunderbolt, I use USB, so I'm limited to 24 channels. So this is essentially what Pro Tools sees as the available outputs from your Orion. ADAT in, I don't use ADAT, SPDIF don't use, AFX, I was using that for a little bit. This is the output of your AFX. So if you go over here to your effects, these are your different channels for your effects, and you can add in different compressors, EQs and stuff, and you can even like track with them and print. I was doing that for a while before I had more outboard gear, and it actually worked like pretty well. And these are your submix outputs. This is where it gets a little bit confusing to explain. So these are like physically the outputs of your DB25 line outs, and you can route anything to them from the USB play or Thunderbolt play, which is what Pro Tools sees. For example, this is SSL channel 1, SSL channel 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is what I showed you, it's all feeding to. So I have the USB play 5 through 12 outputs going to the line outputs 1 through 8 of the DB25 cables, which is then feeding to channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the console, the SSL SiX console. So hopefully that kind of like clarifies it for you. The USB play is just a digital hub of what Pro Tools sees, and then within the matrix you can route that to physical outputs. So then you have HP1, HP2, those are your headphone 1 outs, headphone 2 outs on the physical, on the Orion. So headphone 1, for example, I have 1 and 2 of mix 1 feeding into there, which is being sent to artists in the booth. So they hear everything that I wrote to mix channel 1 here. So Pro Tools sees channels 23 and 24 here of the USB play, and I have those labeled headphone 2 left and right, just a stereo pair. So let's say I plug in my headphones into headphone 2 jack on the front of the Orion. I put my headphones on, and I will only hear anything that's being sent to digital channels 23 and 24 in Pro Tools. So I'll send like the beat, the vocals, like all that stuff from Pro Tools to channel 23 and 24 of the Orion, which is then being routed to headphone 2 output on the front. So this is your monitor out. So this was something I struggled with when I was first setting up the Orion. It was how I could hear my computer playback and Pro Tools playback at the same time without them like conflicting. Essentially, you have to use the first 2 channels as you're monitoring. Those first 2 channels are going to be reserved for your computer playback as well. Like let's say I want to monitor. I have SSL monitor right here. And if we look in my IO, we look at output, SSL monitor out, that's channels 1 and 2. So if we go in here, channels 1 and 2 right here, that's being routed to my monitor. And then also in like Windows, for example, the output device is channels 1 and 2. You can't really pick from any others. So yeah, just channels 1 and 2, that's reserved for your Windows and just overall playback. Then you have your reamps, which is on the front of the Orion on the right side. You can send things out to be reamped, like guitars and stuff like that. USB record, that's essentially what your Pro Tools sees as your inputs on your Orion. For example, like I have my Stamchild 660 compressor coming in on channel 9, and I have that routed to USB record 13. So if we go to channel 13, boom, that's the 660. Right here. And I have my SSL Mixbus outputs coming into inputs 11 and 12 on the Orion. And then I have that being routed to USB record 11 and 12. I tried to keep them like matched up. If you look on 11, 12, that's my SSL bus in, which is my master right here, SSL bus in. So that's everything that's being summed and being sent out of the SSL SiX. I also have the room mic being routed to channel 5. Channel 5 here, that's my room mic. So sometimes I'll want to add like background vocals to an artist song. I can just quickly switch my input. The flexibility with this setup is really, really dope. So if you want to know how to use the AFX, here's a quick little walkthrough of how to do that. So let's say you have, my WA73 EQ preamp coming in on input 6 of the Orion. I can route that to AFX in, which I have here, of channel 6 of AFX in. And now you could take the AFX output, so everything that's post-processing of what you do in the AFX realm. I could keep that on channel 6, the USB record 6. Then we jump in here. I could add like whatever, a compressor or whatever. Now when you set the input of Pro Tools to channel 6, you're gonna be recording and printing everything you do effects-wise in here. So if you wanna print with compressors and stuff, you can do that. Or another thing you could do, let's say you don't want to track the effects. Now channel 6 is just getting like the raw output from the preamp. You can still send preamp to AFX in and then take the output, and let's say theoretically I could send that to the artist on mix channel 1. So now they can hear their voice like fully compressed while they track, but Pro Tools is still only getting the uncompressed, unprocessed signal. So you have a lot of flexibility with the Matrix. It's actually really dope. So as a quick overview of the software side of things with the Orion Matrix, USB play is what Pro Tools sees as your outputs, and then USB record is what Pro Tools sees as your inputs. And you can manipulate it however you want. And then that paired with the SSL SiX and the way SSL allows you to route things with their stereo Q sends, you get a lot of flexibility, and you actually get like a lot of channels with the SiX for summing, and the flexibility of swapping between recording and then mixing a record. I can swap between recording an artist and then jumping into a mix in less than 5 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully that wasn't like too confusing. I know when I was like first learning about this stuff, it was like super daunting and confusing, especially opening up this Matrix. I was like, wow, like that's a lot. But the more you use it, mess around with it, the better you'll get with it, and the more you'll understand it. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked the video, drop a like, leave a comment if you want, and I appreciate you watching. Deuces.